He signed the eviction papers with a smirk. That was what Serena Vale remembered most. Not the cold language of the legal document, not the resort's board members refusing to meet her eyes, not even the security guard standing awkwardly by the door. It was the smirk. Victor Sorin, the man she had trusted with 7 years of her professional life, sat at the head of the conference table she had personally selected, wearing that thin, satisfied smile like a man who had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. "You have 48 hours to vacate the premises," he said pleasantly. "Management transition. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. Serena looked at the document, then at Victor, then out the window at the Gulf water she had watched every morning for 7 years. The water her son had learned to swim in, the pier her son had learned to fish from, the beach that was the only home Noah had ever known. She picked up the pen. She did not sign. "Tell me something, Victor," she said, her voice absolutely steady. "Does he know you're doing this?" The smirk flickered, just barely, just enough. And that was when Serena Vale understood that whatever was about to happen next, she was not going to survive it by being afraid. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, if you've ever watched someone take everything you built and smile while they did it, stay with me. Because this story is about what happens when a woman decides that losing is no longer an option. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss what comes next. Hit that like button and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Part 1. The morning. It all started unraveling. Serena Vale was doing what she did every morning at Azure Dunes, moving fast and pretending she wasn't tired. She had her master keycard in one hand, a coffee she hadn't touched going cold in the other, and a radio clipped to her hip that had already crackled twice with complaints she needed to handle before 8 a.m. The resort hummed around her in that particular way it did in the hour before guests woke up, the cleaning staff moving through corridors with practiced quiet, the kitchen clattering into its first preparations, the Gulf water outside shifting from gray to pale gold as the sun found its footing on the horizon. 7 years. 7 years she had managed this place, and she still had that small involuntary catch in her chest every morning when she walked through the lobby and saw the light coming off the water. Some people were built for corner offices and city towers. Serena had always belonged somewhere she could hear the ocean. She pushed open the door to the service corridor and nearly walked into Marco, her head of maintenance, who was holding a clipboard and looking like a man who had not slept. "We've got a problem on the East Pier," he said without preamble. "Third board from the railing post is cracked through. I put up a rope barrier, but somebody's already moved it." "Of course they have." She reversed direction without breaking stride. "Get Rodriguez and go behind me. I don't want anyone out there until we've assessed it." "Already called him, and Serena—" Marco hesitated in that way he had when the thing he needed to say was going to complicate her morning further. "Noah's out there." She stopped. "I saw him come through the kitchen at 6:30, Marco said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You know he does that sometimes. Takes bread for the pelicans." Serena was already moving toward the pier doors. She found Noah exactly where Marco said he would be, at the far end of the East Pier, crouched at the railing with a fistful of bread torn into pieces, completely absorbed in the small drama of pelicans jostling each other for position on the water below. He was 7 years old, all elbows and uncombed hair, and he was wearing his sneakers on the wrong feet, which she had corrected twice the night before and apparently accomplished nothing. "Noah," she kept her voice level. "Buddy, I need you to come here." He looked up. He had his grandmother's nose and her own dark hair, but the eyes were something else entirely, pale, almost silver blue, with a quality of absolute attention that had unnerved pediatricians and delighted kindergarten teachers in roughly equal measure. Eyes that looked at you like they were calculating something. "The pelican with the torn wing is back," he said, as if this were relevant to whatever emergency she was about to describe. "I named him Gerald. Gerald needs to wait. Come here." He came with the resigned dignity of a 7-year-old who has learned that arguing with a certain tone of voice is a waste of energy. She got him off the pier, got him handed off to Delilah from housekeeping with instructions about breakfast and homework, and turned back to assess the structural problem with Marco. She did not know, standing there on that pier in the early morning light, that somewhere on the resort's winding coastal road, a black SUV was pulling through the main gate. She did not know the man inside it had spent 7 years in a world so far from hers, it might as well have been a different planet. She did not know that in approximately 4 hours, her son was going to come sprinting around the corner of the South Pavilion and crash directly into a man who would stop time. She did not know any of that yet. She just had a cracked pier board and a cold coffee and a radio that was cracking again. She answered the radio. The morning moved forward. Adrian Cross had not planned to come to Florida. That was the simplest way to explain it, though nothing about Adrian's life was simple and hadn't been for a very long time. He had flown into Tampa because one of his operations there had developed a problem that required his personal attention, and the problem had resolved itself in the way problems tended to resolve themselves when Adrian Cross walked into a room and looked at people with those quiet, particular eyes. And then his security chief, a compact man named Briggs, who communicated almost exclusively through implication, had suggested that the Azure Dunes property was 40 minutes south, and perhaps worth reviewing, given that certain parties had recently expressed interest in acquiring it. Which parties? Adrian had said. Briggs had shown him a file. Adrian had looked at the file for a long moment and then closed it and looked out the window at nothing in particular. Book a suite, he said. 3 nights. That was how he had explained it to himself anyway. Business. Due diligence on a coastal acquisition. The kind of thing a man in his position did routinely, without sentiment, without any particular feeling attached to a name or a place or a memory of the kind of summer that only happens once in a life and leaves a mark so permanent you eventually stop trying to cover it. He checked in quietly. He was good at arriving places without drawing attention, which was a skill developed through genuine necessity over many years, and was not something he was particularly proud of, though he had made peace with needing it. The suite they gave him was on the 4th floor, overlooking the Gulf, and when he opened the balcony door and stood for a moment in the salt air, he felt something in his chest that he refused to name. He unpacked methodically. He had a meeting at 2 o'clock with the resort's financial administrator, a man named Holt, who did not yet know that the meeting was not really about the quarterly P&L he had been asked to prepare. Adrian changed into clothes that communicated nothing in particular. Good fabric, no logos, the kind of thing that reads as money without announcing itself, and went downstairs to walk the property. He was on his second circuit of the South Pavilion, noting the wear pattern on the deck planking and the age of the irrigation system feeding the coastal gardens, when the collision happened. He heard the footsteps first, fast, careless, the particular rhythm of a child running at full speed with no awareness of consequences. He turned halfway before impact. The boy hit him at approximately knee height, bounced back with an audible oof, and sat down hard on the deck. Adrian crouched automatically. "You all right?" The boy looked up. The world did not actually stop. He knew that even as something in his nervous system went very still and very cold, because the world does not stop. The waves kept moving. A gull called somewhere overhead. A staff member somewhere in the garden was running a leaf blower. The world kept going. It was only Adrian that stopped. The boy had eyes the color of shallow water over white sand. Pale. Almost silver blue. The exact color of the eyes Adrian had seen in mirrors his entire life and never thought anything particular about, because eyes are just eyes, until the moment they are not. "I'm okay," the boy said, rubbing his elbow. He looked at Adrian without any of the wariness most children showed around men they didn't know. Just that direct, assessing look. "You're tall." Adrian found his voice somewhere. "You were running." "I know. Sorry." He didn't sound especially sorry, but he said it with enough sincerity that it passed. He had a Band-Aid on his left knee and his sneakers were on the wrong feet. "I was looking for Gerald." "Who's Gerald?" "A pelican. He has a torn wing. He's my friend." He stood up, dusted himself off with the efficient self-sufficiency of a child accustomed to taking care of small injuries alone. "Have you seen a pelican with a torn wing?" "I haven't been on the pier yet." "He's usually by the pier, or sometimes by the south dock, but he doesn't like it there because of the boat engines." He studied Adrian with those terrible eyes. "Are you a guest?" "I am." "My mom manages this place. She'd want me to apologize properly." He held out his hand with the solemnity of someone who has been taught that handshakes are serious business. "I'm Noah." Adrian took the small hand. His own was not entirely steady. "Adrian," he said. Noah nodded, apparently satisfied. Then he was off again, not quite running, but moving with that restless forward momentum children carry like weather. And Adrian stayed crouched on the pavilion deck for a moment longer than was necessary, his hand still slightly open, his thoughts completely blank. He stood. He looked at the pier. He looked at the Gulf. He went back to his suite and stood in the bathroom with the water running cold over his wrists for a while, which was something he did occasionally when he needed his mind to clear. It did not entirely clear, but it cleared enough. He called Briggs. "I need everything you have on Serena Vale," he said. "Manager here, 7 years. Before that." A pause. "We have a file." "I know we have a file. I need what's not in the file. Family, relatives, anything personal." Another pause, longer. Briggs was not a man who asked unnecessary questions, which was why Adrian kept him. "By when?" "An hour." "I'll see what I can do." Adrian hung up. He looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, the years on it, the way a life of permanent vigilance settles into a man's face, and thought about a boy with his eyes on the wrong feet in his sneakers, running along a resort pier looking for a pelican named Gerald. He went to his 2 o'clock meeting. He sat across from the financial administrator and listened to quarterly numbers that told him, in the flat language of spreadsheets, that Azure Dunes was managed with exceptional precision and almost no waste, which was the professional fingerprint of someone who cared about the place rather than just the numbers it produced. He asked several questions that had nothing to do with acquisition and everything to do with the daily operational structure. "Ms. Vale handles most of that herself," Holt said, with the faint admiring exasperation of a subordinate who respects their boss and finds them slightly exhausting. "She's not. She doesn't delegate the way most managers would. She knows every contractor, every supplier relationship, every staff member's schedule. I've been here 4 years and I still find things she set up before I arrived that I didn't know existed." "What kind of things?" Holt considered. "Last month we had a hurricane prep situation. Category 2 came up fast. I was ready to call the evacuation protocol. We have a standard one. And Serena walked in and said she'd already contacted the structural engineer about the East Wing, already pre-positioned the emergency generator fuel, already called the county liaison about the storm shelter access for staff who couldn't evacuate. She'd done it at 3 in the morning from her apartment on property because she woke up and checked the weather radar." He paused. "She's that kind of person." Adrian thought about this. "What apartment?" "She lives on property, one of the staff bungalows near the North Garden. She has for, I think, the whole time she's been here. Her and her son." Adrian nodded as if this were mildly interesting information. It was not mildly interesting. Briggs came to his suite at 5:30 with a tablet and an expression that was, for Briggs, unusually careful. He laid it on the table without preamble. Adrian looked at the photograph first, a 7-year-old's date of birth, a name, Noah Thomas Vale. Then the secondary document that Briggs had pulled from a source Adrian was not going to ask about, because there are certain things you don't ask about when you're the kind of man Adrian was. Father, not listed. Adrian sat back. "The timeline works," Briggs said quietly. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything yet." "Okay." Briggs waited. He was good at waiting. "Does she know I'm here?" "Not unless Holt mentioned you by name in their daily briefing, which I can check." Don't do anything yet." Adrian closed the tablet. "What do we have on Victor's interest in this property?" "That's the part that's been bothering me." Briggs reached into his jacket for a folded document, actual paper, which meant he'd printed it, which meant he thought it was the kind of thing that shouldn't exist only in a cloud server. "The acquisition inquiry didn't come through our standard channels. It came through a subsidiary we haven't used in 3 years. Someone reactivated it." Adrian looked at the document. "Who has authorization to reactivate that entity?" 3 people, technically. You, me, and Victor." "Victor." They looked at each other. "Pull everything we have on Victor's movements in the last 6 months," Adrian said. Quietly. "Nothing through the main network." "Already started," Briggs said. "After you called me this morning." Adrian looked out the window at the Gulf, which had turned the color of hammered copper in the late afternoon light. "I thought about what it meant that Victor Soren, his most trusted advisor, the man who had been at his side since the beginning, the man who had been there the night Adrian received the letter that ended everything, had quietly tried to acquire a resort managed by a woman named Serena Vale. He thought about a boy with silver blue eyes named Noah, who had knocked him sideways at the South Pavilion and shaken hands with the serious formality of someone who understood that certain moments deserved to be treated properly. He thought about the letter, the one he had read and reread until the paper fell apart, because he needed to understand how someone he had loved could simply walk away. The letter in Serena's handwriting that had said, in plain terms, that she had chosen her life without him, that she didn't need him to come back, that she wanted him to let her go. Adrian had let her go. He had spent 7 years letting her go. And now Victor had tried to quietly acquire her resort. "I need to see the original letter," Adrian said. Briggs went still. I know we don't have it. I need you to find me something to compare the handwriting against. Anything she signed here. A contract, a maintenance log, anything." Briggs understood. He was good at understanding things without being told exactly what they meant. "That could take a couple of days." "I have 3 nights booked," Adrian said. "Use them." Serena did not know any of this was happening. She knew, the way she always knew things about her resort, that something was different. She felt it in the particular quality of the afternoon, the way Holt avoided her eyes at the 5 o'clock briefing, the way 2 of the maintenance crew had been somewhere near the South Pavilion more times than the job required, the way her own instincts, which she had learned to trust over 7 years of managing a place where every staff member and every guest and every operational variable needed to live inside her head simultaneously, were prickling at something she couldn't name. She chalked it up to the Victor situation, because the Victor situation was the thing that was actually sitting at the front of her mind, the thing she came back to in the moments between tasks, the thing that was making it hard to sleep. Victor Soren, the resort's primary investor, and the man who sat on its board of directors, had sent 3 emails in the past 2 weeks requesting a meeting about the resort's operational future. He had copied the resort's owner of record on 2 of them. He had not copied Serena. She had been a professional long enough to know what that meant. What she didn't understand was why. The resort's numbers were exceptional. The occupancy rates had been above 90% for the past 3 quarters. She had managed 2 significant storm events and 1 serious plumbing infrastructure failure without closing the property. By any metric she knew how to read, she was doing her job. But Victor had started doing something that made her skin crawl, and it had started approximately 3 weeks ago, and she couldn't pin it to any specific incident. He had started having conversations with her staff that she only heard about secondhand afterward. The kind of conversations that weren't about anything in particular, just checking in, just getting to know people. The kind of conversations that felt like mapping. She had not mentioned it to anyone because she didn't have anything concrete to point to, and because the thing she had learned in 7 years of managing a place full of people who each had their own loyalties and their own histories and their own reasons for doing what they did, was that accusation without evidence creates exactly the kind of chaos that benefits the person you're accusing. So she watched. She filed things away. She kept moving. She was in the kitchen at 6:30 checking on the dinner prep when she heard Marco's voice behind her, low and urgent. "Serena, there's a man in the lobby asking for you by name." She turned. "What man?" "Didn't give his name, came to the front desk, tall, dark jacket. He said..." Marco paused. "He said he's an old friend." Something happened in Serena Vale's chest that she did not entirely understand. A constriction, a drop. The particular physical sensation of a door opening that you thought was sealed shut. "What does he look like?" she asked, and was proud of how even her voice was. Marco described him. And as Marco described him, the height, the quiet way he held himself, the gray at his temples that hadn't been there before, the eyes that had made the front desk clerk momentarily forget what she was doing. Serena felt the kitchen around her go slightly distant, the way things go distant when your body is absorbing something faster than your mind can process it. She knew. Before she had finished the description, before she had asked a single clarifying question, some part of her that had been waiting 7 years without admitting it already knew. "Tell him I'm busy," she said. Marco blinked. "He said he'd wait." "Tell him," Serena said carefully, "that he can wait as long as he wants." She turned back to the dinner prep. Her hands, when she pressed them flat against the steel counter, were not quite steady. Adrian Cross was in her lobby. Adrian Cross was in her lobby, and her son was 50 yards away in the North Garden bungalow doing his homework, And Victor Soren had been mapping her staff for 3 weeks, and somewhere in the space between those three facts was a shape she couldn't look at directly yet, because it was too large and too ugly, and she was standing in a kitchen with 20 people around her and dinner service in 40 minutes. She breathed, she straightened, she picked up her radio. She did not go to the lobby, but her heart, God help her, was running like a freight train all the way through the dinner service, and she did not sleep at all that night, and in the morning, everything started to break open. Serena did not sleep. She lay in the dark in the staff bungalow with Noah breathing slow and even in the next room, and the gulf moving outside the window the way it always did, indifferent and enormous, and she stared at the ceiling and made herself think clearly. She was good at thinking clearly. She had built an entire life on it, the ability to take a situation apart into its components and deal with each one in sequence without letting the emotional weight of the whole thing crush her into uselessness. So she thought clearly. Adrian Cross was in the resort. That was a fact. She had not spoken to him, had not seen him, had sent Marco with a message that communicated exactly what she intended it to communicate, that he could wait as long as he liked, and she would get to him when she decided to, which was the only form of power she had available at this moment, and she was going to use it deliberately. Noah did not know his father's name. That was a decision she had made in the earliest, hardest months after Adrian disappeared, and she had revisited it enough times over 7 years to know that she still believed it was right. Noah knew that his father was someone she had loved a long time ago, someone who was gone, someone she didn't talk about much. He had accepted this with the particular pragmatic equanimity of a child who has never had a reason to question the shape of his own life. That shape was about to change. She felt it the way she felt weather, not quite knowing, but knowing enough. The way the air changes before a system moves in. At 5:30, she gave up on sleep, made coffee, and sat at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen, which was how she dealt with things that were too large to carry in her head alone. She wrote down everything she knew, Adrian, Victor, the 3 weeks of quiet conversations with her staff, the emails that hadn't copied her, the acquisition inquiry she hadn't known about until Holt had mentioned something offhand yesterday that had sent a cold wire straight through her sternum. She looked at what she'd written. Then she turned the page and wrote, "What does he want?" She sat with that for a long time. Outside, the sky went from black to the particular deep blue that precedes dawn, and the pelicans started their morning passes over the water, and somewhere on the property, a door opened and closed as the first kitchen staff arrived for breakfast prep. She tore the page out, folded it, put it in the pocket of her robe. She went to wake up Noah. Adrian was already in the restaurant when the breakfast service opened at 7. He had a table by the window, not the best table, not the kind a man showing off would choose, but the one with the direct sightline to the kitchen entrance and the staff corridor. He ordered coffee and read nothing and watched everything with the quality of attention that was, in his line of work, indistinguishable from patience. He was on his second cup when he saw her. She came through the staff door with a radio and a clipboard and a walk that he recognized before his mind had finished processing the face, that particular forward lean, chin slightly down, the walk of someone moving toward a problem rather than away from one. Her hair was shorter than he remembered. There were things in her face that hadn't been there before. Not age exactly, or not just age, but the layered quality that comes from years of making decisions under pressure, from carrying things alone. She looked up and saw him. She did not stop walking. He had not expected her to. She was not a woman who stopped, but he had expected something, some flicker. She gave him a single long look across the length of the restaurant, and what he read in it was not what he had braced for. It was not grief or longing or even anger. It was assessment. She was calculating him, the way she would calculate anything that had arrived on her property without a clear purpose. And then she looked away and continued toward the front desk, and Adrian set down his coffee cup and understood that the next move was going to require considerably more than showing up. He left the restaurant at 7:45. He was crossing the lobby when her voice stopped him. "Mr. Cross?" He turned. She was at the front desk, not looking at him, signing something the clerk had slid in front of her. Her voice had been perfectly level, professional. "I have 15 minutes at 10 o'clock, she said. "My office." She handed the clipboard back to the clerk and walked away without waiting for his response. He watched her go. Briggs materialized at his elbow from somewhere. "How'd it go?" "She gave me a meeting." That's good. Good. She made me wait for it. Also good. Means she's not running. Adrian thought about the look she had given him across the restaurant, the one that had weighed him and filed him and moved on. She's not running, he agreed. She's doing something else. What? I haven't figured that out yet. Well, the office was spare in the way of someone who does not need decoration to feel competent. A desk, a set of filing cabinets, 2 chairs for guests, a window with the blinds angled to let in light without glare, a child's drawing tacked to the wall beside the monitor, a pelican, roughly rendered in blue crayon, with what appeared to be a band-aid on one wing. Serena was behind the desk when he came in. She did not stand. "Close the door," she said. He did. He sat in one of the guest chairs without being invited, which he suspected she had noted. She was looking at him with that same quality of flat assessment, and he made himself hold it without filling the silence, because the first person to fill a silence like this one was the person with something to explain. She lasted about 4 seconds longer than he did. "I don't know what you want," she said. "So say it." "I want to know if Noah is my son." Whatever she had expected, it was not that. He saw it. A fractional break in the composure, there and gone in less than a second. But he had spent years reading rooms full of dangerous people, and he did not miss small things. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What makes you think you have the right to ask that question?" "I'm not arguing about rights. I'm asking you a question." "After 7 years." "Yes." Her jaw tightened. "You walked away." "I received a letter. I know what letter." Her voice went flat and hard. "I know exactly what letter. You received a letter and you decided it was easier to believe it than to pick up a phone. And I spent 6 months after that." She stopped. Reset. Breathed. "I spent 6 months wondering what I did wrong." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "I need you to listen to me." "I am listening." The letter was not Serena. He stopped, because the name in his mouth felt like something he didn't have the right to yet. "I have reason to believe the letter was not what either of us thought it was." The silence that followed was a different kind. She was looking at him now with something that was trying very hard not to be hope and was doing a poor job of it. "What does that mean?" she said, very careful, very quiet. "It means I need to verify something before I say more. But I need you to understand, I did not choose to leave. I was given information that told me you had made that choice, and I believed it, and I—" He paused. "I was wrong to believe it without confirming it. That's on me. But I need you to know that there was no morning. I woke up and decided you were something I could walk away from." She looked at him for a long time. Her hands were flat on the desk, very still. "You need to verify something," she repeated. "Yes. And until you do." "Until I do, I need you to be careful." Something changed in her face, not softer, harder, but in a different direction. "What does that mean?" "It means Victor Soren has taken a significant interest in this property recently, and in you specifically." The stillness that came over her was the stillness of recognition, not surprise. She already knew something was wrong. He could see it, the way the information landed not as a shock but as a confirmation. "How long have you known Victor?" she said. 12 years. "And you trust him?" "I trusted him." Past tense. She heard it. "What did he do?" she said. "I don't know the full shape of it yet." "But you suspect?" "Yes." She stood up, not abruptly, with the controlled movement of someone managing a physical response to emotional information. She went to the window and stood with her back to him, looking at the gulf through the angled blinds. "My son," she said, to the window, not to him. "He has your eyes." Adrian said nothing. "I noticed it immediately, when he was born." She turned around. Her face was composed, and it had cost her something to make it that way. "I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself I was projecting. I had a lot of time alone to tell myself things." "I know." "No." Her voice went sharp and quiet. "You don't know. You don't know what alone means in this context because you weren't there. So don't tell me you know." He absorbed that. "You're right." She looked at him like she was trying to decide something. Then she crossed to the desk and picked up her radio. "I'm going to need something from you." "Anything." "Don't say anything. You don't know what I'm going to ask. She set the radio back down. I need you to be honest with me about what's happening with Victor. Not the version where you protect me from information you think I can't handle. The actual version. That's fair. And I need... She stopped, pressed her lips together. I need a couple of days before Noah knows who you are. I need to be the one who tells him, in my own time, in my own way. Can you give me that? Yes. Okay. She looked at her watch. I have a staff meeting in 10 minutes. I need you to go. He stood. He was almost to the door when she said his name, not Mr. Cross, just Adrian, the way she used to say it, without any preparation. And he stopped. If you're lying to me, she said, about any of this, about Victor, about the letter, about any of it. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I know, he said. He left. The sniper shot came at 11:43. Serena was crossing the South Garden path between the main building and the equipment shed. When she heard the sound, not quite what she expected a gunshot to sound like, more compressed, like something snapping at speed, and the decorative ceramic planter 3 feet to her left exploded. She dropped behind the garden wall before she had consciously processed what was happening, pure reflex. The radio was in her hand and she was calling Marco before she'd finished falling, her voice completely flat. Lockdown protocol, now. No guests on exterior paths. Do it. She stayed behind the wall. Her heart was doing something she'd prefer it not to do. She pressed her back to the warm stone and breathed through her nose and counted 1, 2, 3. She was not shot. The planter was destroyed. The angle of the impact suggested the shot had come from the northeast, which was the direction of the resort's maintenance access road. Her radio erupted with Marco's voice confirming lockdown. Immediately after, Briggs. She didn't know how Briggs had her radio frequency. She found out later he'd pulled it from the resort's emergency contact documentation in the 3 hours since Adrian's meeting. At the moment, she just heard a voice she didn't recognize saying her name and saying, "Stay down," with the brisk authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Who is this?" she said. "Briggs, I work for Cross. Stay behind the wall. We have a team moving to the northeast access point." "There's a team." "Yes, on my property." "Ms. Vale, someone just shot at you." "Yes, there's a team." She stayed behind the wall. She did not like staying behind the wall. She counted her breaths and thought about Noah, who was in the main building with Delilah because he had a school pickup at 3, and she had arranged it this morning without knowing why. Just a feeling. Just that prickling instinct that had been running for 3 weeks and had apparently been correct. Briggs came back on the radio 4 minutes later. Access point was clear when we arrived. Position was set up, but the shooter was gone. Professional. How professional? A beat. Military-grade suppressed rifle. Bipod marks on the maintenance shed roof. They had a lane that gave them a clean shot at the garden path. Another beat. "Ms. Vale, this wasn't a warning. This was a miss." She let that land. Then she stood up, carefully, staying behind the wall, and looked at the destroyed planter. The ceramic was scattered in a radius of about 4 feet. The shot had hit it dead center. Not a warning. A miss. She had moved, she realized. She'd taken a slightly different angle coming around the path because she'd paused to pick up a piece of trash near the bench. If she hadn't paused. She didn't finish that thought. Adrian was in her office when she got back to the building, which she had not given him permission for and which she did not address because there were larger things at hand. "Tell me about Victor," she said. She did not sit. "All of it. Right now." "Sit down." "Tell me." He looked at her. At the dust on her jacket from the garden wall, at the particular set of her jaw, and apparently decided that pushing the sitting down issue was not worth the time it would take. "Victor Soren has been my chief advisor for 12 years, he said. "He was there when I took over operations after my father died. He has had access to every level of my organization since before I had full control of it." He paused. "Yesterday, Briggs pulled his movements from the last 6 months. Victor has made 6 trips to Florida in the last year. He's met with 3 individuals we've identified as connected to an international consortium we've been in conflict with for approximately 4 years. "Conflict," Serena said. "My business is not..." He stopped. "I'm not going to explain the full structure of what I do to you right now because we don't have the time, and because some of it would make this conversation harder, not easier. What you need to know is that there are people who would benefit significantly from destabilizing my organization, and Victor appears to be helping them. Why would he do that? Because he wants what I have, and because he looked at something on the table that wasn't there. Because he may have understood for some time that the only thing capable of stopping him was something I'd lost, and that if I found it again, everything he's been building toward would be in danger. Serena stood very still. You're talking about Noah. I'm talking about the fact that whoever shot at you this morning was not aiming at you because of anything you've done, Adrian said. They were aiming at you because of what you represent, and what Noah represents. The full shape of it assembled itself in her mind with horrible clarity. Victor had found out about Noah. Victor had understood what Noah meant. Victor had been moving, quietly, over years, over months, over the 3 weeks of conversations with her staff and the emails that hadn't copied her, toward something that would remove the problem before the problem could become a threat. She sat down. The letter, she said. Tell me about the letter. Adrian was quiet for a moment. 7 years ago, 3 days before I was supposed to come back to you, I received a letter. It was in your handwriting. It said you'd made a decision, that you'd thought about what I was, what my life was, and that you couldn't be part of it, that you wanted me to let you go and not contact you. He looked at her. I spent 3 years trying to unread that letter, and 4 more convincing myself I had. Serena felt something cold moving through her chest. I wrote you a letter, she said. He went still. I wrote you a letter because you didn't come back when you said you would. And then I waited. And the letter came back unopened 2 weeks later, and there was a note in the envelope. Her voice was completely flat. The note said you'd received it, and you'd decided it was for the best, and you wished me well. They looked at each other across the desk. Neither of us wrote those letters, Adrian said. No, Serena said. We didn't. The silence between them was enormous and quiet, the way a crater is quiet after the explosion is done. Victor has had access to my correspondence for 12 years, Adrian said. He knows my handwriting. He's forged my signature on documents before, with my knowledge. It would not have been difficult. He took 7 years from us. Yes. He took Noah's father. Yes. A pause. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Fix it. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not softened exactly, but settled, the way a man's face settles when he recognizes the particular weight of a situation and decides to carry it. I'm going to need you to trust me, he said. I don't trust you yet. I believe you, which is different. She looked at the window. Tell me what you need. Before he could answer, Marco knocked once and opened the door without waiting, which meant it was the kind of thing that didn't wait. We have a problem, Marco said. He looked at Adrian, looked at Serena, apparently decided that the presence of a stranger in the manager's office was a secondary concern. I was checking the basement mechanical rooms during lockdown. Standard sweep. He held up his phone, a photograph on the screen. Found this. Serena took the phone. The photograph showed the far corner of the resort's oldest mechanical room, behind the HVAC housing, where no one had any reason to go. A small camera mount, cables running into the wall. It's not ours, Marco said. I checked the asset registry twice. We've never installed anything in that location. Serena looked at the photograph. Then she looked at Adrian. Someone has been watching this property, she said. Yes. For how long? Marco answered before Adrian could. The cable housing has oxidation on it, and the mount hardware is an older model, discontinued about 6 years ago. He paused. If I had to guess, Ms. Vale, 4 or 5 years minimum, maybe more. Serena sat with that number, 4 or 5 years. Noah had been 3, maybe 4 years old, and someone had already put cameras in the foundation of the place she was raising him. How many? She said quietly. I found 3 in the mechanical rooms. I don't know how many in the rest of the building. Find them all. That could take. Find them all, Marco. Don't tell anyone else on staff why. She handed the phone back. And pull the maintenance access logs for the past 5 years. Anyone who was in that basement who shouldn't have been. Marco left. Serena looked at Adrian. You said Victor made 6 trips to Florida in the last year, she said. Has anyone been tracking his movements longer than that? No. So he could have been coming here for years. Adrian looked at the photograph Marco had left on the table, or rather at the empty space where it had been. Yes. He built something here, Serena said. I don't know what yet. But the cameras, he wasn't just watching, he was tracking, building a record. Of Noah. Of Noah, Adrian agreed, and his voice, when he said it, had a quality she hadn't heard from him yet in the hours since his arrival. Not anger. Anger was familiar, manageable. This was the controlled quiet of a man deciding to unmake something. I need access to the resort's full infrastructure records, he said. Blueprints, utility maps, anything that shows underground systems. Serena frowned. Why underground? Because the cameras need to be feeding somewhere, and because someone needed a way to move in and out of this property without appearing on the guest registry. He looked at her directly. When was the basement last fully inspected? Annual inspection. Last one was... She stopped, pulled up a date in her memory. 8 months ago. But it was a fire safety inspection, not structural. They wouldn't have gone behind the HVAC housing. Before that? Full structural was 4 years ago, when we upgraded the east wing. Who conducted it? She looked at him. The cold wire was back, running straight through her chest. It was contracted, she said slowly. The board brought in their own contractor for that one. They said our usual firm had a conflict of interest. She pulled up the records on her computer, fingers moving fast. Pulled up the contract documentation, found the name. She turned the screen to face him. The contracting company's registered agent, Victor Soren. He used the inspection to build access, Adrian said. Not a question. He used my resort, Serena said, and her voice was very quiet and very dangerous. He used my resort for however long he needed it, and I managed it every day and never knew. She closed the laptop. She put both hands flat on the desk and looked at them. I need to know something, she said, and I need a straight answer. Ask. Is my son safe right now? Adrian did not answer immediately, and the fact that he didn't answer immediately told her more than any answer he could have given. Briggs has people on the building, he said finally, but until we know the full scope of what Victor has built here, is my son safe? Not as safe as I want him to be. She nodded, once, short. Then we need to move faster, she said. She picked up her radio. She was going to call Delilah and check on Noah, and then she was going to pull every blueprint and utility record the resort had, and then she was going to find out exactly what had been built beneath the place she called home. But the radio crackled first. It was a voice she didn't recognize, patched through on the resort's secondary emergency channel, the one only her senior staff and the board had the frequency for. Ms. Vale. A pause. Male voice measured, with the particular flatness of someone accustomed to the weight of words. I think it's past time we had a conversation without Mr. Cross in the room, don't you? Victor Soren. On her emergency channel, proving, with the casual ease of someone demonstrating something they've owned for a very long time, that nothing in this resort had ever been entirely hers. She looked at Adrian. He was already on his feet, reaching for his own phone, and his face had gone to a place she had no reference for. The absolute absence of readable emotion that was, she would understand later, more frightening than any expression she could have imagined. She pressed the transmit button. Victor, she said, I've been wondering when you'd stop hiding. Victor's voice came through the emergency channel with the unhurried ease of a man who had never, in his life, been required to rush. Serena kept her thumb on the transmit button and her eyes on Adrian, who had gone completely still in the way of things that are about to move very fast. His phone was in his hand. He was not looking at it. He was looking at her radio with an expression she couldn't read and didn't try to. I'm not hiding, Serena, Victor said. The use of her first name was deliberate. She felt it land like a hand on the back of her neck. I've been right here the entire time. That's rather the point. Where is here? She said. A pause. Then, close enough to matter. She released the transmit button. He's on the property, she said quietly. Adrian was already typing something on his phone. He showed her the screen, a message to Briggs. 4 words. Lock the north perimeter. She shook her head. North perimeter is half a mile of coastline. If he knows the underground layout. He does, Adrian said. Not loud, just flat. She nodded and picked the radio back up. What do you want, Victor? She said. What I've always wanted. Simplicity. Another pause, and in the silence she heard something. Faint, ambient. The sound of water. Not the Gulf, something more contained, something underground. I want Adrian to make a decision he should have made 12 years ago, and I want the boy kept entirely out of whatever comes next. His name is Noah. I know his name. The way he said it, with that same flat patience, as if the name were a fact he'd been carrying in a file for years, made her stomach drop. Adrian reached across the desk and took the radio from her. She let him have it, not because she was deferring, but because she needed both hands free and she needed to think. "Victor," Adrian said. "There he is." Something shifted in Victor's voice. Not warmth, nothing close to warmth, but the particular tone of a man addressing someone he has studied so completely that affection and contempt have become indistinguishable. "I was wondering when she'd hand you the radio. Tell me what you've built under this property." A soft sound that might have been a laugh. "You can see the blueprints. I'll have them sent up. I'm rather proud of the engineering. Honestly, 12 years of conversations and not one structural engineer who didn't sign the confidentiality agreement I put in front of them." A pause. "Your father would have appreciated this patience, Adrian. He always said I was more patient than you." Adrian's jaw moved, one small muscle, once. "Don't." "He also said you were too emotional for what this life requires. He was right about most things." "What did you do to him, Victor?" The silence that followed was 6 or 7 seconds long, which in a conversation like this one was its own kind of answer. Serena stopped moving. She had been crossing toward the filing cabinet where she kept the resort's oldest infrastructure records, and she stopped with her hand on the drawer handle and did not open it. "Your father was going to give the organization to someone outside the bloodline," Victor said. "He'd decided you were unsuitable. Too much conscience, he told me. Too much of your mother in you." Another pause. "I disagreed with his assessment. I simply couldn't allow him to act on it." The room was very quiet. "You killed him," Adrian said. "I made a decision that allowed the correct succession to occur." Victor's voice had not changed. It was the same measured, pleasant tone he might use to discuss a board meeting outcome. "And then I managed that succession for 12 years because you were not yet what you needed to be. I have been, in every meaningful sense, the actual architect of your empire. Your name is on it. My hands built it." Adrian set the radio down on the desk. He set it down carefully, the way you set something down when every instinct you have is telling you to put your hands through a wall. He breathed once through his nose, and Serena watched him do it, watched the effort it took, the deliberate mechanical quality of a man forcing his own nervous system to stand down, and understood that what she was seeing was not anger. It was the decision to be more dangerous than anger allows. "Keep him talking," he said to her very quietly. "I need 3 minutes." He went to the door. She picked up the radio. "Victor," she said, "how long have you known about Noah?" A beat. Then, with something that was almost gentle, "Longer than you'd like." "How long?" "I knew you were pregnant before Adrian did. Before you did, very nearly." A pause. "I had people watching both of you that summer. I needed to know the nature of the attachment before I decided how to handle it." She pressed her back against the desk. Her legs were not doing what she needed them to do, and she needed them to keep doing it anyway. "You decided how to handle it. The child complicated things. An heir changes the calculus of succession significantly. If Adrian had known about the boy, he would have prioritized him above the organization, which would have created vulnerabilities I couldn't manage." Another pause. "The simplest solution was to make sure he never found out." 7 years, she said. "My son grew up without a father for 7 years because it was convenient for your management strategy." Serena. Her name again. Patient. Explaining something to someone who is taking a long time to understand. "Everything I've done has been in service of building something that outlasts all of us, including the boy. The cross-organization, managed correctly, is a legacy that will—" "Where is my son?" she said. Silence. "Victor, where is Noah?" "Noah," he said after a moment, "is exactly where I need him to be." The radio went dead. She was out the office door before the feedback hiss finished. She was running before she'd made the conscious decision to run, which was a thing she hadn't done since she was a child, full speed through the corridor with the radio bouncing against her hip, and one thought moving through her head with the clarity of something that has burned off everything non-essential: the North Garden bungalow, Delilah, Noah's homework, and his sneakers on the wrong feet, and Gerald the Pelican. She hit the exit door at the end of the hall and came out into the resort's central courtyard, and Briggs was there. Not where she'd expected him, not coming from the direction of the perimeter, but standing outside the door like a man who had been coming to find her and had found her first. His face told her before he said anything. "The bungalow's clear," he said. He meant empty. He meant already searched. Staff member, Delilah, is in the main building. She says the boy was with her until about 30 minutes ago. He told her he was going to the pier to check on the Pelican. 30 minutes. The call from Victor had come through at 11:20. If Briggs's timeline was right, Noah had left the building 10 minutes before Victor called. 10 minutes before Victor had said, with that pleasant patience, "Noah is exactly where I need him to be." "He knew we were in the office," Serena said. She was not shouting. She understood on some level that shouting would cost her something she needed. He watched us go in. He waited until Noah was alone. "We're sweeping the pier now." "He's not on the pier." She said it with complete certainty because she knew her son, and she knew that when Noah went looking for Gerald, he did not stay on the pier if Gerald wasn't there. He went to the south dock. I went to the flat rocks at the base of the east cliff where the pelicans roosted in the afternoon. He wandered, in the particular self-directed way of a child who has grown up with the whole resort as his personal geography, through maintenance paths and garden corners that most guests never found. She also knew something else. She knew that any one of those paths ran over or alongside the resort's underground infrastructure, and that someone who had spent years mapping that infrastructure knew exactly where to intercept a 7-year-old boy who moved through this property like he owned it. Adrian came out of the building at a near run. He read her face and stopped asking questions before he'd started them. "Tell me you have the blueprints," she said. "Briggs pulled them from Victor's subsidiary archive 20 minutes ago." He held up a tablet. On the screen, the resort's underground layout, which was nothing like the official resort layout she had managed for 7 years. The official layout showed utility corridors, drainage systems, the mechanical rooms where Marco had found the cameras. This layout showed something underneath all of that, a network of reinforced passages that ran in a roughly southward direction from the resort's basement level, branching, rejoining, terminating in what appeared to be a series of chambers near the coastline. Serena took the tablet. She rotated the image and oriented herself. 7 years of knowing this property in 3 dimensions settled into place over the underground map, and what emerged was something that made the hair on her arms stand up. "This exit point," she said, pressing her finger to the screen. "This is the East Cliff, right at the base. There's a sea cave there. I've seen it from the water. I always assumed it was natural erosion." "It is natural," Adrian said. "He used what was there, extended it. The structural contractor did the work in 3 phases over 4 years, each phase permitted separately so no one would see the full scope. And this," she traced a corridor that ran directly beneath the resort's north garden, directly beneath the bungalow where she and Noah had lived for 7 years. "This runs under my home." "Yes." She handed the tablet back. She did not say what she was thinking, which was that the knowledge of that tunnel's existence, its proximity, its purpose, the years it had been there while she slept 10 feet above it, was going to take a long time to process, and that she was going to have to process it later because right now she needed every functioning part of her mind for the thing in front of her. "How do we get into the network?" she said. "There's an access point in the basement mechanical room, the one Marco found the cameras near." Marco found 3 cameras. He was looking for more. "I need Marco out of that basement," Adrian said. "Now, before he finds the access point and triggers something." She already had the radio up. She reached Marco on the second try and pulled him out with a cover story about a pressure issue in the East Wing. He didn't push back. Marco had been with her long enough to know that when she used a certain tone, you moved first and asked questions later. They went down together, Serena, Adrian, and Briggs. Through the service corridor to the basement level, which smelled of machine oil and old concrete and the particular damp that never entirely left a building this close to the water. The mechanical room was large and poorly lit, the HVAC housing running the length of one wall, the floor marked with the chalked grid Marco had drawn while conducting his sweep. Briggs found the access point in under 2 minutes, which told Serena he already knew approximately where to look. It was behind a false section of wall paneling near the oldest section of the drainage system. A panel that looked like every other panel, except that the dust along its lower edge had been disturbed recently. Repeatedly. Someone had been using this door. Not just building it, using it regularly for a long time. Briggs ran his hand along the edge, found the release mechanism, and the panel swung inward on hinges that had been maintained carefully. No rust, no squeak, no resistance. On the other side was a passage, concrete-walled, lit by a strip of low emergency lighting that was currently on, which meant the system was active, which meant someone was in it. Adrian looked at her. "You don't have to come." "Yes, I do," she said. "I'm the one who knows this property, in 3 dimensions above ground. You need me to navigate this by reference to what's above us." He looked at her for a moment. Then he stepped back and let her go first. The passage was taller than she'd expected, close to 7 feet, which was enough to move through without ducking, engineered for function rather than comfort. The walls were smooth, poured concrete with drainage channels running along the base. The emergency lighting threw everything in amber and shadow. Her footsteps were quiet because she was moving carefully. Briggs's behind her were nearly silent. Adrian's not silent at all, because he was a large man and the passage was not designed to disguise movement. She navigated by feel and by knowledge. Every time the passage branched, she paused, oriented herself against the map she'd built in her head. The guest bungalow cluster would be above and to the left, the equipment shed above and ahead, the cliff edge somewhere ahead and below, the ground sloping with the natural coastal grade. And she made decisions based on that orientation, moving toward the East Cliff access point, which was where the map terminated and where the passage opened up into the sea cave she had looked at from a kayak 3 years ago and thought was a natural feature. She had been correct that it was natural. She had been wrong that natural meant safe. They had been moving for about 6 minutes when she heard it. A voice. Adult, male, not Victor's measured tone, but someone else entirely, younger, with the clipped efficiency of someone following instructions. Then silence. Then a small sound she recognized in the way you recognize something you have heard in 1,000 everyday contexts and then hear suddenly in a wrong one. Noah. Not crying, not calling for her, just making the quiet sound he made when he was trying very hard not to be scared, which she had heard twice in his life. Once when he was 5 and had a high fever, and once when a stingray had come too close while they were wading in the shallows. The particular sound of her son managing fear by himself. She stopped moving. She put her hand flat on the wall. Adrian was close behind her. She could feel the heat of him. And he stopped when she stopped. She turned to look at him. She did not speak. She pointed down the left branch of the passage, held up 2 fingers, then pointed at herself. 2 men. I go. His face did something complicated. He put his hand around her wrist, not grabbing, just contact, and leaned close enough to speak directly into her ear at a volume that was barely air. There's another entry point 30 feet above the cave. Briggs goes in from above. I go up the left branch. You stay here. She turned her head and put her mouth equally close to his ear. He will not respond to either of you. He doesn't know you. He knows me. A pause. She felt him not arguing, which was its own kind of argument. You are not a weapon, he said. I'm his mother, she said. Right now that's worth more than a weapon. Another pause. Then his hand released her wrist. He held up 3 fingers, mouthed, 3 minutes. She nodded. He and Briggs moved to the right branch, moving faster now with less concern for sound, and Serena turned to the passage opened into a wide chamber that was half natural, half engineered. The sea cave extended and reinforced with steel supports that had been painted to blend with the rock, the floor leveled, the back wall fitted with equipment she didn't have time to catalog because the first thing she saw when she came through the chamber entrance was Noah. He was sitting on a concrete ledge along the left wall with his arms wrapped around his knees. He was not restrained. He was not visibly hurt. He had his sneakers on, still on the wrong feet, she noticed with the strange clarity of adrenaline. And he was looking at the 2 men in the chamber with the focused, quiet attention he brought to things he was trying to understand. One of the men saw her first. She did not give him time to react because she did not slow down. She crossed the chamber floor in 8 steps and crouched in front of Noah, her hands on his face, checking with her fingers and her eyes simultaneously. No blood, no injury, pupils even, breathing fast but not panicked. Mom. He said it with the particular mix of relief and dignity that meant he had been holding himself together and was now allowing himself to stop. I went to look for Gerald, and then, I know. Are you hurt? No, they said to sit, and I sat. He looked at the men, then back at her, with those silver blue eyes that had been keeping her awake at night since before he was born. They're not going to hurt us. He said it with the certainty of someone who has assessed the situation and come to a conclusion. She did not tell him that his assessment, while admirable, was the optimism of a child who had not yet learned what men were capable of when they needed something badly enough. The man who had seen her first had recovered. I was moving toward her now. Not rushing, just repositioning, with the lateral movement of someone who has been trained to always maintain an angle. It was holding a phone, not a weapon, which told her something. Ms. Vale, he sounded almost apologetic. I need you to step away from the boy. That's not going to happen. Ms. Vale, what is your name? She said. She stood up, putting herself between Noah and the man, and looked at him with the full force of 7 years of managing people who did not want to be managed. What is your actual name? He blinked. It was involuntary, the way people blink when they're addressed as human beings in contexts where they expected to be treated as obstacles. Dylan. Dylan, I'm Serena. I manage this property, which means I am currently standing in a room that is inside a structure that is technically part of my operational jurisdiction. And I need you to understand that whatever Victor Soren told you about this situation, the situation has changed significantly in the last 20 minutes. Dylan looked at the second man. The second man, older, harder-faced, less uncertain, shook his head slightly. I have my orders, Dylan said. Your orders were given to you before this morning's events, before the shooter at the South Garden, which I assume you know about. She watched his face. Before Victor got on my emergency channel and announced that he murdered Adrian Cross's father. She paused. Which means Victor is no longer operating from concealment. He's operating from desperation. And men who take orders from desperate people end up carrying consequences that were never theirs to carry. The older man said, She's stalling. Yes, Serena agreed. I am. She put her hand back and found Noah's shoulder. Noah, I need you to stand up very carefully and stay directly behind me. He stood. She felt his hands close on the back of her jacket. The older man moved. He moved fast and to her right, which put him on an angle away from Noah and toward her, and she understood in the fraction of a second she had to understand it that he was not moving toward her to grab her, but to move past her to Noah, and she shifted her body left to compensate, and then everything happened at once. The upper access point, 30 feet above the cave floor, barely visible as a shadow in the rocky overhang, opened. Briggs came through it not quite the way she'd imagined, not rappelling or dropping with any kind of drama, just falling with the controlled efficiency of a man who has done this before and considers the landing a technical problem rather than a death-defying act. He hit the cave floor, rolled once, and came up between Noah and the older man with something in his hand that made the older man stop very quickly. The chamber entrance behind her opened. Adrian came through it. He came through without pausing and crossed the floor directly to where Serena was standing, putting himself beside her, and looked at the two men with an expression that was not anger, and not calculation, and not anything she had a clean word for. It was the look of a man for whom the situation has become entirely personal, which was the most dangerous kind of look there was. Dylan, Adrian said. Marcus, he knew their names. She hadn't expected that. How long have you been working for Victor? Marcus, the older man, said nothing. 3 years, Dylan said. He said it with the deflation of someone who has just finished calculating odds and found them wanting. Victor brought us on for the Florida operations, the resort monitoring, among other things. Where's Victor now? Dylan and Marcus exchanged a look. The look had a shape to it, a decision, made quickly, about where the weight of consequence was actually going to fall. Marcus said, He has a secondary access point, southwest of here, opens to the coast road. Show me, Adrian said. She stayed with Noah. She did not want to stay with Noah because every instinct she had wanted to follow Adrian into the tunnels and be present for whatever happened next. But Noah was 7 years old and had spent 30 minutes in a sea cave being guarded by strangers, and what he needed from her in this moment was not a warrior, it was a mother. So she sat on the concrete ledge with her son tucked under her arm and she listened to the storm that had been building all afternoon finally arrive. The sound of it came down through the cave walls as a change in pressure first, then as the low, continuous percussion of rain on the cliff face above them, then as the particular hollow echo of waves changing character as the swells built. "Mom," Noah said. He had been quiet for several minutes, which was unusual. "The man with the gray hair." "Which man?" "The one who came in after Briggs, the one with—" He made a gesture with his hand that she did not entirely understand, but which she thought was trying to describe the way Adrian moved. "He looked at me." "I know." "He looked at me like—" Noah stopped, assembled something. "Like Delilah looks at her daughter's photographs. On her desk." He paused. "Like that." Serena tightened her arm around him and did not say anything. "Who is he?" Noah said. She looked at the cave wall, at the sea-smoothed rock and the steel supports that had been installed in secret over years, and at the water coming in now from the storm surge, thin fingers of gulf reaching across the cave floor with each wave cycle. "He's someone I need to tell you about," she said, "when we're out of here." "Is he good?" She thought about that question. She thought about the 12 years of what Adrian Cross was and had been and had built and had done. She thought about a man who had believed a forged letter and spent 7 years letting her go. She thought about him coming through the passage entrance with that expression on his face when he saw Noah standing behind her. "He's trying to be," she said, which was the most honest answer she had. Noah accepted it with a nod, the way he accepted most things. Not entirely satisfied, but willing to wait for more information before forming a final position. He tucked himself slightly closer against her side. The storm above them accelerated. And then Briggs was in the cave entrance, breathing harder than she'd seen him breathe, and his face was doing something it hadn't done in all the hours she'd known him, which was expressing something. "What?" she said. "Victor didn't go to the southwest exit," Briggs said. "Marcus was wrong or lying. Adrian's team swept the coast road. Nothing." She stood up. "Where did he go?" "We don't know yet, but—" Briggs paused, and in the pause she understood that whatever was coming next was the reason his face was doing what it was doing. "He transmitted something before he went dark, to the consortium's network. We intercepted it." "What did it say?" Briggs looked at Noah. She pulled Noah closer and looked at Briggs and waited. "It said the operation is moving to its final phase," Briggs said, "and that the primary leverage point is secure." He stopped. "Ms. Vale, the leverage point isn't Noah. Victor already moved off Noah because he knew we had the cave." The cold wire through her chest again. "Then what?" "He means Adrian," Briggs said. "Victor has something on Adrian that we don't know about yet. Something he's been holding for years. And whatever it is, he just activated it." He looked at the cave entrance behind him, at the storm-dark passage beyond it. "Adrian's been trying to reach his inner council for the past 15 minutes. Nobody is answering." She understood then what was happening. She understood the full shape of it. Not the details, not the specifics of what Victor had activated, but the architecture of the trap. Victor had not come to the resort to take Noah. Not ultimately. Noah was a distraction, a pressure point, a way to force Adrian into a reactive position while the real mechanism closed around him. Victor had spent 12 years at the center of everything Adrian trusted. 12 years with access to every name, every loyalty, every arrangement, every secret. He hadn't needed a gun. He had the organization. "Adrian needs to know," she said. "He knows," Briggs said. "He knew about 30 seconds ago. He called me." "What did he say?" Briggs looked at her with the expression of a man who is about to deliver news that is going to require a decision to be made immediately. He said the consortium has activated claims against every legitimate financial instrument in his organization. Frozen accounts, triggered penalty clauses, called in favors with 3 government regulatory bodies across 2 countries. He paused. 12 years of construction. Victor knew where every support beam was because he put them there, and he's pulling them. The storm was loud now. Louder, the waves building with the storm surge and the hurricane system that the Weather Service had been tracking all week, and that was now, apparently, not going to wait until tomorrow to make itself known. "Adrian," Serena said, "where is he now?" "Coming back through the tunnel." "And Victor?" Briggs was quiet for one moment too long. "Briggs," We found the southwest exit, he said. Victor used it. He's gone to the surface. He looked at her steadily. And the emergency floodgates for the resort's underground drainage system, the ones that are supposed to prevent the tunnel network from filling during storm surge. She was already looking at the water on the cave floor. It had not receded between wave cycles the way it had 5 minutes ago. It was rising. Victor had triggered the flood system. He had built the tunnels, and he had built the flood mechanism that could fill them, and he had left Adrian inside them, and in approximately the time it would take a Category 2 storm surge to overwhelm the drainage capacity of an underground coastal passage. The tunnels would be impassable. Adrian was in them. How long? She said. Briggs looked at the water. 20 minutes, maybe less. She looked at her son. She looked at Briggs. She looked at the rising water on the cave floor and the tunnel entrance behind him, and thought about Adrian Cross moving through a filling passage toward the sea, 12 years of empire collapsing above him, with Victor Soren somewhere on the surface waiting to inherit the wreckage. She handed Noah to Briggs. Get him out through the upper access point, she said. The rope is still rigged. Ms. Vale. The flood override, she said. She was already moving toward the tunnel entrance. It's a resort system. Victor used it because it was here, but it's still mine. She looked back at Briggs. The override panel is in the basement mechanical room. If I can get back through before the water, you can't get back through in time. I know this building, she said. Every pipe, every valve, every system Marco ever showed me. She paused at the tunnel entrance. Victor built his tunnels inside my resort. He used my infrastructure. He should have thought about what that means when the person who knows it best decides to use it back. She went into the tunnel. The water was already at her ankles. Behind her, she heard Noah say her name. Not frightened, not crying, just her name, the way he said it in the morning before she'd had coffee, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And she did not turn around because if she turned around, she would not be able to keep moving. And she needed to keep moving because somewhere ahead in the dark and the rising water, the man who had come back into her life after 7 years of silence was running out of time. The water was at her shins before she had gone 30 feet. Serena moved fast, one hand trailing the wall for orientation because the emergency lighting had started flickering. The flood system disrupting the power draw, she guessed, or Victor had tripped something else before he went dark. The amber strips along the ceiling pulsed irregular, throwing the passage into alternating clarity and shadow, and the water was cold in the way of things that come from deep underground, colder than the gulf above, cold enough to make her calves ache on the 3rd step and numb on the 6th. She kept moving. The tunnel had a slight grade to it. She'd felt it on the way in, barely perceptible, the floor sloping toward the cave at approximately 2 degrees. On the way in, that grade had meant nothing. On the way back, with water moving in the opposite direction, it meant the passage behind her was filling faster than the passage ahead. She was moving uphill against an incoming tide, and she needed to move faster than the water was moving, which was a calculation she made in her legs rather than her head, because her head was occupied with the layout. The junction point was 40 feet ahead. She knew it from the map. The place where the left branch she'd taken met the main trunk passage that ran under the resort's central structure. If the flood was entering from the southeast drainage points, the main trunk would be filling from the far end. If she could get to the junction, get into the main trunk, get to the basement mechanical room access before the water reached shoulder height in the narrower section, she heard him before she saw him. A voice cut short from the right branch of the junction. Not the direction she'd come from, the other one. The one that ran under the north garden and terminated somewhere she hadn't traced on the map. She stopped. Listened. Water moving, wind somewhere in the system creating pressure. The deep structural groan of the resort above responding to the storm. Then, Serena. Low, controlled, directed. She turned toward the right branch, and Adrian came out of it at a pace that was not quite a run, one hand on the wall, his jacket gone, and his shirt wet to the chest. Behind him, Marcus, the older man from the cave, and 2 other figures she didn't recognize. One of them was limping badly. Adrian reached her and stopped. He looked at the water level, looked at her, looked back at the junction behind him. "There's a collapse in the east branch," he said. His voice had the clipped quality of someone managing physical effort. "Section of ceiling came down. 3 of my people are on the other side of it. Are they above the waterline?" "For now. There's another access point in the east wing." She grabbed his arm, turned him, started moving. Service elevator shaft. It opens to the basement from a maintenance level. If they move north through the east branch, they can reach it. She looked at him. Do they have a radio? Cell signal's gone. Storm interference. She pulled out her radio. It won't reach through the concrete. No. Then they need to figure it out themselves. She kept moving. Marcus, can you carry him? She jerked her chin toward the limping man. Marcus looked at her with the expression of a man recalibrating his assessment of a situation. Yeah. Then move. They moved. The water hit her knees at the second junction and her thighs 10 feet past it, which was faster than she'd calculated, which meant the drainage system had more capacity than the blueprint showed, or Victor had opened secondary flood points she didn't know about. Both possibilities were bad. She moved faster and stopped thinking about the water and thought about the mechanical room instead. The layout of it in her memory, the position of the main control panel relative to the access door, the override sequence that Marco had walked her through 18 months ago during a routine emergency systems audit that she had, characteristically, insisted on attending personally. Marco had thought she was being thorough. She had thought she was being thorough. Neither of them had imagined this particular use case. The access panel in the basement mechanical room opened the main trunk drain gates, which would redirect the floodwater from the tunnel network into the resort's primary drainage outflow. A system designed to handle storm surge from above, not below, but which had the raw capacity to move a significant volume of water if all 4 gates opened simultaneously. The override required a physical key, which she kept on her master keycard ring, and a 6-digit code, which she kept in her head and had never written down because she kept things in her head and had never imagined she would need to explain that habit to anyone. The question was whether she could get to the panel before the water made the passage impassable. The answer, she was learning, was that it was going to be extremely close. Adrian was behind her and slightly to her left, close enough that she could hear him breathing, controlled, through the nose, the way someone breathes when they're managing pain. She glanced back and saw him favoring his right side. A hand pressed briefly to his ribs before he pulled it away. She had not asked and did not ask now. Later. Everything was later. The ceiling collapse in the east branch, she said. How? Structural. The water infiltration accelerated a failure point. The tunnel was dug through older limestone in that section. Victor's engineers cut corners on the reinforcement. He paused. Or Victor planned it. As a barrier. In case we came through that way. Hey, yes. She thought about that. He expected us to use the tunnels. He built them for us to use. That's what I didn't understand until about 15 minutes ago. His voice was flat, factual, the way it got when he was assembling something. The tunnels were never just for smuggling. They were the end game. Drive us underground, trigger the flood, collapse the exits. He doesn't need to put a gun to anyone. He just needs to close the doors and wait. She stopped. The water was at her hips. The access door to the mechanical room was visible ahead, 10 feet, the panel set in the wall, the familiar yellow safety stripe across the door frame that Marco had always complained looked cheap. 10 feet, and the water was at her hips, and moving faster than walking speed now, the grade of the tunnel actually working against them from this direction, the water following the same downhill slope toward the cave that they had come up against. Cross, she said. I see it. Get behind me. When I open the door, the water's going to push through fast. There's a 2-inch lip on the mechanical room floor. It'll pool before it drains. You need to be against the wall and not in the doorway when it hits. Serena, against the wall. She looked back at him. I need both hands for the panel. I need you not in my way. Tell Marcus. He relayed it. She pushed forward against the current, and it was a current now, not standing water, the tunnel system generating its own flow as it filled. The last 10 feet taking more effort than the previous 100. The cold so complete in her legs that she was operating on stored body heat and will. She reached the door, got her keycard out with fingers that didn't quite feel like fingers, ran it across the reader. The reader light went red. She stared at it. The power, Adrian said from behind her, pressed against the wall as she'd told him. The reader needs power. She turned the key slot cover. The mechanical override was underneath, a physical cylinder, independent of the electronic system, installed during the resort's original construction in 1987 before everything went electronic, kept because the county's emergency management requirements mandated manual backup systems for basement drainage in coastal structures. She put the key in, turned it. The door opened inward, and the water came with it, a surge that hit her from behind and pushed her through the doorway and into the mechanical room on her hands and knees in 18 inches of rising water. She got up. The control panel was on the far wall, above the HVAC housing, at exactly the height a person standing on the mechanical room floor could comfortably reach, because the person who had specified its installation had been thinking about access during flooding and had specified accordingly. She got to it in 4 strides, reached up, found the override panel cover, pulled it, 6 digits. She pressed them with fingers she couldn't entirely feel, watching the pad to make sure she was hitting the right keys because she could not trust her tactile feedback. The system did not respond. She pressed the sequence again. "It's not accepting," Marcus said from the doorway. He'd stopped there, holding the limping man upright, the two of them filling the frame. "I know it's not accepting." She stared at the panel. The water on the mechanical room floor was above her ankles now, moving fast, the room collecting what the tunnel was pushing. "Adrian." He was beside her. "What do you need?" "The panel is getting secondary power from the emergency battery backup, but the backup has a different authorization protocol. It was updated 2 years ago, after a county audit." She ran her hand along the panel housing. "The new protocol is a keycard swipe plus the code, but the reader is on the east side of the housing and the code pad is on the west side, and you need both entered within 5 seconds of each other. You need 2 people." "I need 2 people." She looked at him. "Keycard reader is on your side. I'll run the code. On my mark." He took the keycard from her hand, moved to the reader panel. She moved to the code pad and waited, watching him, watching his hands find the reader in the flickering light. "Mark," she said. He swiped. She entered the code. The panel lit green. For 1 second, nothing happened, and in that second, the water hit her calves and she heard the structural groan from somewhere deep in the tunnel network. Something giving way. The limestone doing what limestone does under pressure and time. Then the drain gates opened. She felt it before she heard it. A change in pressure, a shift in the water's behavior, the current reversing fractionally as the outflow system took hold. Then the sound. Enormous, mechanical, the 4 main gates dropping simultaneously, the drainage outflow engaging with the full capacity of a system designed to move Gulf surge water in a coastal emergency. The water on the mechanical room floor stopped rising, held, then began, almost imperceptibly at first and then faster, to recede. She put both hands on the HVAC housing and pressed her forehead against the cool metal and breathed. Adrian's hand came to rest between her shoulder blades. Not pressing, just there. "The East Branch," she said without lifting her head. "Your people. The drain reversal will clear the tunnel fast enough." A pause. "Briggs will get them out. And Noah. Briggs had him through the upper access before we were 60 seconds into the tunnel." She lifted her head. The water was dropping visibly now, the mechanical room floor reappearing in sections as the outflow did its work. She turned around and looked at Adrian, who was standing in the receding water with his shirt soaked through and his hand still pressed to his right side, and an expression that was not relief. Relief would come later, she thought, if there was a later. But the particular quality of a man who has just survived something and is already thinking about what comes next. "Victor," she said. "Yes." "He's on the surface. He's been on the surface for 20 minutes, which means he's had 20 minutes to—" He stopped. Something moved through his face. "My counsel." Briggs said they weren't answering. "Before the tunnels, yes." He pulled out his phone. The signal was still gone. She could see it on his face when he checked. He looked at Marcus. "Get to the surface. Find any signal you can and get word to Reyes. Anyone who's still answering. Tell them to hold position and do nothing until I'm there." Marcus went, the limping man going with him, and then it was just Serena and Adrian in the draining mechanical room with the storm above them and the tunnel system slowly evacuating around them. And she looked at him and he looked at her, and neither of them said the thing that was in the room with them, because the thing that was in the room with them was too large for the moment, and they both knew it. "He's going to try to take the organization while I'm dark," Adrian said. "He has the financial instruments frozen. He has contacts in my council who've been waiting for a signal. The signal was the consortium activation. That was the message he sent." He paused. If he reaches enough of them before I do, the structure flips. Everything I built gets absorbed into the consortium's framework, and Victor runs it as a division of something larger and more dangerous than what I've been managing. And you. And I become a liability. She absorbed that. Noah. Noah is no longer useful to Victor if the organization has already transferred. He stopped. Say it. A loose end, Adrian said, that he'd want closed. The words sat between them in the draining water and the flickering light. Serena reached down and picked up her radio from where she'd dropped it when she came through the door. It had been underwater for several minutes. She pressed transmit. Static, then nothing. Dead. She set it on the HVAC housing. Tell me what you need, she said. Some. They came up through the basement stairs into a resort that had been transformed by the storm. The emergency lighting was on in the main building. Exterior power was down, the backup generators running the interior systems at reduced capacity. The windows along the east corridor were sheeted with rain, the palm trees in the central courtyard horizontal, the gulf invisible beyond the white noise of horizontal precipitation. The resort's emergency lockdown was still in effect, which meant the corridors were empty of guests and the staff were in their designated shelter positions, which meant the building was quiet in the wrong way. The way it was quiet when the people who should be moving through it weren't. The lobby, when she came into it behind Adrian, had one person in it. Victor Soren was standing at the front desk with his phone to his ear and his suit jacket still impeccably on, as if he had come in from a light rain rather than a Category 2 storm that was currently taking the resort apart outside. He looked at them the way a man looks at something he expected to see and had prepared for completely. He ended the call. Put the phone in his pocket. You made it, he said. Not surprised, not relieved, just noting a fact. Victor. Adrian's voice was completely level. They had stopped 10 feet inside the lobby. Who have you reached? Enough. Victor looked at Serena with something that was not quite respect and not quite regret, a look that sat between the two. You are more capable than I expected, Mrs. Vale. I want you to know that's not something I say reflexively. Where's my son? She said. Safe. Entirely. He said it without hesitation, which she found, to her own surprise, credible. Victor was many things. I was not, she thought, a man who found satisfaction in harming children. He was a man who found satisfaction in architecture, in structures, in systems, in the elegant mechanisms of power arranged just so. Noah had been a lever, a pressure point. The point had been applied, and he was done with it. I want to see him, she said. You will. This will be brief. Victor looked at Adrian. I've been on the phone for 22 minutes. In that time, I've spoken to Kellner, I've spoken to the Ramirez brothers, and I've spoken to Falk. Adrian's jaw tightened at each name. She didn't know what the names meant specifically, but she knew what his jaw meant. Falk is holding, Victor continued. He's waiting to hear from you directly, which tells you something about his character that I never adequately valued. The Ramirez brothers have made their position clear. They go where the money is solvent, and your financial instruments are currently not. And Kellner, a pause. Kellner has always been mine, since before you trusted him, since before you gave him the Eastern Distribution Network and the access codes that go with it. You planted him, Adrian said. I positioned him. Victor corrected it with the precision of a man for whom language is structural. I've been positioning people for 12 years, Adrian. I positioned you. I took a young man with too much conscience and too much sentiment, and I arranged him into something the organization could use. I am not apologizing for that. I built what your father couldn't. My father? Your father was going to give it to an outsider. Victor's voice didn't change. He'd found someone, a man named Cortez, out of the Miami network. Experienced, bloodless, no sentimentality. Your father met with him twice before I found out. A pause. I could not allow that. So you killed him. I made a decision. The same phrase he'd used in the tunnel, the same tone. And then I spent 12 years making you into someone who could run what your father never fully understood. I removed Serena because attachment is a vulnerability. I removed the child from your awareness for the same reason. I gave you 12 years of focused purpose. He paused. And then you came to Florida. Because you tried to acquire this property. Victor looked at him steadily. Because I was closing the last open variable. The woman, the child, the connection. I needed it resolved before I moved to the final stage. A pause. I didn't expect you to find them first. You underestimated me. No, Victor said it simply. I underestimated her. He looked at Serena. I've been in this organization for 30 years. I have managed men who would level cities without losing sleep. And a resort manager with a maintenance radio and a basement drainage code is the thing that ends it. Something crossed his face. I should have resolved this variable years ago, when I first understood what she was. What she is, Adrian said, is the reason you're done. I'm not done. Victor reached into his jacket. Not fast, not threatening, deliberate, like a man producing a document. He held up his phone, showing the screen. A number. An active call on hold. Kellner has the Eastern Network. The Ramirez position controls the shipping infrastructure. The consortium has the financial instruments. What you have is a building in a hurricane and a woman who opened some drain gates. He looked at Adrian. Walk away. Take her and the boy. I will honor that. I need you to believe I mean it, and I do mean it. Walk away, and I will not touch them. And the organization? The organization becomes what it should always have been. A structure, not a legacy. A machine, not a monument to a name. Victor lowered the phone. This was never about destroying you, Adrian. It was about finally running this correctly. The storm hit the lobby windows with a sound like something being struck repeatedly, the whole east-facing glass wall flexing under a gust that the building structure absorbed but announced loudly. Adrian took one step forward. Victor's hand moved back to his jacket. Don't, Adrian said. I have a call on hold. End it. Adrian, Victor. His voice dropped, which was worse than if it had risen. I'm going to say one thing to you, and I need you to hear it completely. Every man you've named, Kellner, the Ramirez brothers, the consortium contacts, they are loyal to power. They have been loyal to power their entire professional lives, which is why you could position them, which is why you could arrange them. Power is the only thing they understand and the only thing they respond to. He paused. You froze my financial instruments, but I've been liquidating assets for 6 days. Victor went still. Quietly. Through channels you didn't plant, through people you don't know, because there are a few of those. Not many, but a few. I started liquidating the moment Briggs showed me your movement patterns. Adrian looked at him. By the time you made those calls, Victor, the Eastern distribution network Kellner thinks he controls was already transferred to a holding entity he doesn't have access to. The shipping infrastructure, the Ramirez brothers' anchor, was restructured 48 hours ago. What you handed your consortium partners tonight was a photograph of a building that had already been emptied. The lobby was very quiet. Victor's face did not collapse. It was not that kind of face, but something left it, some quality of absolute certainty, of the long patience of a man who has planned too carefully to be wrong, draining away in the particular way of things that have been cut from their foundation. You knew, Victor said. When you came here, you already knew. I suspected. Briggs confirmed it 3 days ago. Adrian looked at him. I came anyway. Because of Noah. Because of Serena. Because there are things that are worth more than the endgame. He paused. You never understood that. That's why you lost. Victor moved. He moved not toward Adrian but sideways, toward the east corridor, toward the emergency exit that opened to the resort's exterior stairwell, and he moved fast with the surprising quickness of a man 20 years younger than he appeared. And Serena was not in his path, but she was close enough that his hand came out to push her aside. She didn't go aside. She planted her feet on the lobby floor and caught his arm at the elbow and used his own momentum. He was heavier than her, significantly, but he was moving in a direction and she redirected that direction, not stopping him but bending it, and he went into the edge of the front desk rather than through the corridor, catching it with his hip hard enough to stagger. It bought 2 seconds. Adrian covered the distance in 2 seconds. He caught Victor by the collar and the wall got involved, and then it was not something she watched because Noah came through the lobby door from the interior corridor at that moment. Briggs behind him, out of breath, with the expression of a man who had been trying to prevent exactly this and had not managed it. And she crossed to her son before anything else. She dropped to her knees in front of him. He was dry. He was uninjured. He was looking past her at Adrian and Victor at the wall with the focused, calm attention of a child who has decided to understand everything he has seen rather than be frightened by it. Mom, he said, is it over? She put both hands on his face. Almost, she said. Behind her there was the sound of Victor saying something. One last construction, one final arrangement of language into the shape of leverage. And then the specific silence that follows when the last card in a hand has been played and found insufficient. She held her son's face in her hands and listened to the storm outside, which was doing what storms do, spending itself, massive and indifferent, against everything in its path, with no interest at all in what survived or what didn't. Then a new sound came through the lobby. Not from outside, not from the corridor, but from below. From the tunnel access. A banging, rhythmic, the sound of someone hitting a concrete wall with something metallic. Adrian's people in the East Branch, following the reversal of the flood current toward the maintenance level access she'd described. Alive. She exhaled. Briggs, Adrian said from somewhere behind her, controlled. Secure him and get the East Branch access open. My people are in there. On it. And call Falk. Use my personal line, not the network. Tell him it's done. A pause, and in this pause she heard something she hadn't expected. Briggs's voice with an unfamiliar quality in it, something that in a less contained man would be described as relief. Yes, sir. Footsteps. The lobby thinning out, the storm continuing its work on the windows. Noah looked at her. His expression was the one he got when he was working up to asking something that he'd already decided to ask and was only managing the timing of. That man, he said. Adrian. Yes. He was going to tell me something. He paused. Before. In the tunnel. He looked like he was going to say something, and then he didn't. She looked at her son's face, the nose, the dark hair, the eyes that were not hers and had never been hers, that had been looking at her every day for 7 years from a face she loved completely. He'll tell you, she said, when you're ready. Noah considered this with the seriousness it deserved. When will I be ready? She looked up. Adrian was standing 10 feet away, watching them with those terrible familiar eyes, and his hand was pressed to his ribs again, and there was a cut on his forehead she hadn't noticed before that was going to need attention, and he looked like a man who had been running from something for 12 years and had just, in the past 30 seconds, stopped running and not yet figured out what standing still felt like. He looked like a man who would wait. However long it took, he would wait. Soon, Serena said. Outside, the storm was beginning, very slowly, to decide it had done enough. The storm took another 4 hours to finish what it had started. Serena knew this because she sat through all 4 of them, in the resort's interior shelter corridor, with Noah asleep against her shoulder at around the 2-hour mark, his weight familiar and absolute, his breathing the slow, even rhythm of a child who had decided that the emergency was sufficiently over to allow unconsciousness. She did not sleep. She listened to the building talk back to the wind, the deep structural language of a well-made thing under pressure, the groans and flexions that she had learned to interpret over 7 years the way a sailor learns to read a hull. The building held. It always held. She had made sure of that, in 100 small decisions over 7 years, in contractors chosen carefully and maintenance schedules kept obsessively, and the annual structural audit she had fought the board to fund 3 years running. The building held because she had made it hold, and sitting in the corridor with her son's weight on her shoulder, she found a grim and quiet satisfaction in that fact that had nothing to do with the events of the past 12 hours and everything to do with who she was. Adrian sat across the corridor, his back against the wall, his legs stretched in front of him. He had a field dressing on the cut above his eye that one of Briggs's people had applied with the brisk efficiency of someone who has done this before and finds it unremarkable. His hand was no longer pressed to his ribs, which she took to mean either the pain had subsided or he had decided to stop acknowledging it. She suspected the latter. He was not sleeping either. He was looking at Noah. He had been looking at Noah with intervals since Briggs had brought the boy into the corridor 2 hours ago. Not continuously. He was not a man who stared, and he was too careful of his own dignity for something as unguarded as open staring, but in the way of someone who keeps returning a gaze to a specific point because something there keeps requiring verification. Like a man checking, repeatedly, that a thing he had stopped believing in is actually present. She watched him do it. She didn't say anything. At some point, Briggs appeared at the corridor entrance and crouched near Adrian and said something in a low voice that Serena didn't catch. And Adrian listened and nodded once, and Briggs went away. She raised her eyebrows across the corridor. "Falk confirmed," Adrian said quietly, so as not to wake Noah. He held the Northern Network. The consortium partners who were relying on the Eastern distribution structure found nothing there when they went to activate it. 3 of them have already sent communication asking for a revised arrangement. What does that mean? It means Victor's coup lasted approximately 90 minutes and accomplished nothing except the flooding of my tunnels and 1 cracked planter in your garden. She looked at him. And the 3 people who were in the East Branch. A pause. Out. Marco found the maintenance level access. They're bruised. Nothing structural. She exhaled. Noah shifted against her shoulder, resettled, kept sleeping. "Victor," she said. "Secured. Briggs has him in one of the resort's storage rooms with 2 people on the door." Adrian paused. "He'll be handed to people I trust to process him correctly. It won't be quick and it won't be painless, but it will be handled." She thought about what handled meant in the context of Adrian's world, and she thought about Victor's 12 years of architecture and his pleasant voice on the emergency channel, and the letter he had written in her handwriting and the 7 years of consequences that had flowed from that letter, and she found that she had very little feeling about whatever handled entailed, which was its own kind of information about what the past 12 hours had done to her. "There's something else," Adrian said. His voice had changed slightly. Not softer, more deliberate, the way it got when he was about to say something he had been organizing carefully. "Before Briggs pulled me out of the tunnel, before the floodgates opened, I found something in the southeast chamber, the one closest to Victor's main access point." He reached into his shirt pocket and produced something she didn't immediately identify in the low emergency lighting. A folded paper, water-stained, sealed in what appeared to be a plastic document sleeve that had kept it dry despite everything. Victor kept records, not digital. He didn't trust digital for the things that mattered most. Physical files, in sealed sleeves, in the chamber. What kind of records? The kind that document everything he did. He looked at the sleeve. The letters. The original drafts, both of them. The one he wrote in your handwriting and the one he wrote in mine. There are also financial records, communication logs, evidence of the arrangements he made to have my father's death ruled a cardiac event. He looked at her. Everything he built, he documented. Because he was proud of it. Because he believed he would never be in a position where the documentation could be used against him. She looked at the sleeve, at the folded papers inside it, blurred by water at the edges, but intact in the center. "The letters," she said. "Yes. I want to see them." He held the sleeve out without hesitation. She took it with her free hand, the one not supporting Noah's weight, and held it without opening it. She looked at the water stains on the sleeve, the way the paper inside had rippled slightly at the edges despite the protection. 12 years in a sealed chamber under a resort she had managed without knowing it was there. She set it in her lap. Not yet. Not in a corridor with emergency lighting and her son sleeping against her shoulder. There was a version of opening that document that required better circumstances, a steadier moment, more of herself available than she currently had. But she held it. That felt sufficient for now. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "When Noah was born," she stopped, organized it. "When Noah was born, I was alone. It was 3 in the morning and the hospital was very quiet, and the nurse who came in afterward was a woman named Patricia, who had been doing this for 30 years, and she had this way of placing him in my arms that was so practiced it looked effortless, and I looked at his face and I thought," she paused, "I thought that whatever I'd lost, I'd gotten this instead. And I decided that was enough. I made myself decide it was enough." Adrian said nothing. "I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty," she said. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand that I built something, by myself, in the time you weren't there. And whatever comes next, that doesn't disappear. I don't disappear. I know that. I don't think you know it fully yet, but I need you to know it before anything else happens." He woke at dawn. The storm had been over for 2 hours by then, and the resort had slowly repopulated its corridors as the staff confirmed the all-clear by section. Marco going room to room in the systematic way she had trained him, radioing her with each confirmation until the picture was complete. Minor structural damage to the east wing exterior, significant debris on the pool deck and coastal garden paths. The East Pier had lost 2 railings and would need full inspection before reopening. She was in the lobby, beginning the damage assessment process with her clipboard and the organized focus of someone who finds the work of restoration easier to engage with than the alternative, when she heard Noah's voice behind her. "The Pelicans are back." She turned. He was at the lobby window, pressed up on his toes, looking at the beach. After every storm, the Pelicans came back to the shoreline in numbers, working the churned shallows for the disoriented fish. The surge pushed up, and Noah had noticed this at age 5 and had brought it to her attention every time since, as if reporting a small triumph. "Is Gerald out there?" she said. "I can't tell from here. I need to go to the pier." "The pier is closed until Marco clears it." He accepted this with the compressed disappointment of a child who knows the rule is legitimate and resents it anyway. He kept looking out the window. Then, without turning, "Is Adrian still here?" She had been waiting for this since dawn. She had been waiting for it, in some form, since the previous afternoon. "Yes," she said. "Can I talk to him?" She set the clipboard on the front desk. "Come here." He came. She crouched to his level. He was getting tall enough that this was becoming less necessary, which was its own daily loss, and looked at his face in the gray post-storm light coming through the lobby windows. "There's something I need to tell you first," she said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago, and I didn't. And I want you to know that the reason I didn't was because I was trying to protect you from something I didn't fully understand myself." Noah looked at her with those eyes. "About my dad." She had not said the word. He had arrived there himself, through whatever calculation he had been running since yesterday, and she absorbed the fact of that. Her son's mind working its angles, assembling the information he'd been given into the shape of a conclusion. "Yes," she said. "Adrian," he said. Not a question. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. 7-year-olds process things differently than adults. Not worse, not with less depth, but along different channels, and she had learned not to fill his silences too quickly. "Why didn't he come before?" Noah said. She had been ready for anger. She had been ready for confusion or grief or the complicated arithmetic of a child absorbing a large thing. She had not been entirely ready for the directness of it. The simple, clean question that went straight to the center without ornamentation. "He didn't know about you," she said. "Someone kept that from both of us. For a long time." She paused. "And I'm sorry for that. It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't his fault, and it wasn't entirely my fault, but it happened, and you grew up without him here, and I'm sorry." Noah looked at the floor. At his sneakers, which Briggs had apparently found and delivered at some point during the night, and which were, she noticed, on the correct feet for once. "Is he going to leave again?" Noah said. "I don't know," she said. Because she didn't, and he was old enough for that to be the true answer rather than the comforting one. "But I know he doesn't want to." "That's different from not leaving." She looked at her son, 7 years old. "Yes," she said. "It is." He processed this. Then he straightened, with the small gathering motion that meant he had made a decision and was implementing it. "Okay, I want to talk to him." She stood up. She found Adrian where Briggs had last seen him, in the south garden, which had taken damage from the storm and was currently a landscape of debris and flattened ornamental grass and the scattered fragments of the ceramic planter, and he was standing in the middle of it, looking at the beach with his hands in his pockets and his back to the building, and he heard them coming on the debris-strewn path and turned. He looked at Noah. Noah looked at him. She stepped back. Not far. She stayed on the path, within sight, because she was not leaving her son alone with a stranger, regardless of who the stranger was, but far enough to give the space its integrity. Adrian crouched down. He did it the same way he had in their first collision 2 days ago. Automatically, without theater, just bringing himself to a level where the conversation could happen without the asymmetry of height. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Noah said. A pause. "My mom said you didn't know about me," Noah said. "That's right. How do you feel about that?" Adrian looked at the boy for a moment with an expression that Serena, from her position on the path, could not fully read. Then he said, "Like I missed something I can't get back, and like I want to make sure I don't miss anything else." Noah considered this with the gravity it deserved. "I have a pelican named Gerald. He has a torn wing. I check on him every morning. I know. You told me. You remembered. I remember everything about the conversation we had on the pavilion. Noah looked at him steadily. You went very still when you saw me. Yes. Why? Adrian paused. Then, because you have my eyes, and I wasn't expecting that. Noah appeared to find this an acceptable answer. He looked down at the debris on the path, then back up. Are you going to be around? I want to be, if that's something you'd want. Another silence. In the distance, down the slope of the beach that was littered with storm wrack and kelp, a pelican was working the shallows. Broad-winged, deliberate, riding the chop with the competent ease of something built exactly for the conditions it was in. That might be Gerald, Noah said. Adrian turned to look. He goes to the South Beach after storms, Noah said. The fishing is better. He looked back at Adrian. Do you want to go check? Adrian looked at the beach, looked at Noah. Something happened in his face that was private enough that she looked away from it, because some things are not meant to be witnessed in their entirety. Yeah, Adrian said. I do. She watched them go down the path to the beach, the man and the boy slightly ahead in the way of children who assume you'll keep up, the man adjusting his pace to follow without being asked. She watched until they reached the shoreline, and Noah pointed at something in the shallows, and Adrian crouched again to see what he was pointing at. She looked down at the document sleeve in her hands. She had been carrying it since the corridor. She hadn't put it down. She stood on the garden path in the post-storm silence, the specific quality of silence that comes after sustained noise, the way the world sounds slightly unreal in its own quiet, and opened the sleeve. There were 2 letters inside. She knew before she looked at them which was which, because her own handwriting was as familiar to her as her own face. She unfolded the one that was not hers first. Victor had been meticulous. The handwriting was Adrian's. She knew it from the one letter he had sent her that summer, early on, before the phone calls became the primary mode, and the letter had been preserved in a box in a closet she had not opened in 6 years. Victor had reproduced it with the patience and precision of someone who had studied it extensively, which he had. The content was brief, controlled, the voice recognizable in its structure if not in its feeling, the voice of a man choosing power over love in clear final terms. She read it once, she folded it, she unfolded the other one, the one Victor had written in her handwriting. She read it. She recognized the specific language of her own grief, the sentence structures she used when she was trying to be strong and fair and not let the rawness through, the particular way she constructed difficult truths when she was trying to deliver them cleanly. Victor had read enough of her communications, 7 years of property management correspondence, contracts, emails, staff memos, to understand the architecture of how she wrote. He had used it the way he used everything, as material. She folded both letters. She put them back in the sleeve. She walked to the bench at the edge of the garden, the same bench near which the sniper's shot had been aimed yesterday, a fact she noted and filed alongside everything else. And she sat down and looked at the gulf and did not cry, because she did not have it in her right now, and because the thing she felt was not grief exactly. It was the specific sensation of understanding something completely, finally, at full resolution, after a long period of seeing only parts of it. 7 years. Victor's architecture had held for 7 years. It had shaped her life and her son's life and Adrian's life with the same indifferent efficiency as any other structure. You live in a thing long enough, you stop seeing the walls. She sat with it for a while. The Gulf was the color of pewter in the early light, running heavy from the storm, the waves with that rolling authority they got after a major weather system had worked the water for hours. A turn moved over the surface, low and fast, and she watched it until it was gone. Then she put the sleeve in her jacket pocket and stood up and went to find Marco, because the East Pier railing wasn't going to assess itself, and the pool deck debris required a team and she had a resort to put back together, so it took 3 weeks. Not just the storm damage. That was the first week, the straightforward physical work of repair and restoration that she understood completely and found, as she always had, more sustaining than it should have been. The satisfaction of a thing broken being made whole again by competent hands and organized effort. She had a contractor on site by day 2, Marco coordinating the structural work while she managed the operational continuity. keeping the resort functional for guests who had stayed through the storm and processing the returns of the guests who had evacuated. The second and third weeks were different. The second and third weeks were about Victor's tunnels. The county had to be involved, which meant conversations with the building inspector and the coastal management authority that were among the more complicated professional interactions of her life. Explaining the existence of an unauthorized underground network beneath her property without being able to fully explain how she had managed the property for 7 years without knowing it was there. The honest answer, that an extremely sophisticated and patient criminal had used a fraudulent structural inspection to build it without her knowledge, was also the true answer, and she gave it. And the county inspector looked at her with the weary disbelief of a man who has heard many things and found this one genuinely novel. The tunnels were sealed. The cavern access at the East Cliff was structurally compromised by the storm and was closed by the Coastal Management Authority as a public safety issue before anyone from the county had to make a more complicated decision about what it was. Victor's equipment in the chambers was removed and documented by people Serena never met, who arrived in unmarked vehicles and worked with the focused discretion of individuals who do this professionally. She did not ask Adrian specifically who they were. There were things about Adrian's world that she was learning to navigate by feel, the places where asking would produce an answer that would require her to hold something she didn't want to hold, versus the places where the information was genuinely useful and she needed it. This was not the same as willful ignorance. It was the pragmatic economy of a woman who had a resort to run, and a son to raise, and a relationship to build, and only so much cognitive capacity to distribute across all of those things simultaneously. She was good at economy. She had always been good at it. Adrian was at the resort for the first week. He worked. She had not expected him to be someone who worked with his hands, but she found, in the first few days, that he had a particular competence with physical tasks that she thought probably came from the same source as his comfort in difficult terrain. Years of operating in environments where you could not always delegate the physical problem, where sometimes the only person available to carry the thing was you. He helped with the debris clearing on the second day without being asked, working alongside Marco and the resort crew with the adaptable, unshowy efficiency of someone who is good at reading what a task requires and providing it. Marco took to him with the pragmatic approval he extended to anyone who did useful work without making it about themselves. Noah took to him in the specific, unsentimental way of a child who has decided to like someone and is now in the process of finding out whether that decision holds up under investigation. He showed Adrian Gerald on the third morning. The Pelican came to the rebuilt pier railing as if the storm had been a minor inconvenience, arrived with the torn wing and the imperious bearing of something that has survived worse and knows it, and stood beside Adrian for 20 minutes describing Gerald's history, daily habits, known preferences, and personality with the detailed authority of a naturalist presenting a paper. Adrian listened to all of it. He asked questions at the right places. Not the performative questions of an adult humoring a child, but the genuine ones of a person who finds the subject interesting and is working with incomplete information. She watched from the south dock, pretending to check her clipboard, and when Noah pointed at something in the water, and Adrian shaded his eyes and leaned slightly in the same direction to see it, she had to look at the clipboard for a moment and give herself a few seconds. On the fifth day, Noah asked Adrian if he knew how to fish. Adrian said he hadn't done it in a long time. Noah said he would teach him. She had stood in the kitchen doorway watching the two of them on the pier for an hour that afternoon, her son explaining with intense seriousness the technique she had never fully mastered herself. Adrian receiving the instruction with the concentrated attention he brought to everything that mattered to him. And she had thought about the word that Noah had used, teach. Her son, at 7, teaching his father how to hold a fishing rod. The world doing what it did, which was keep moving whether you were ready for it or not. Adrian left for Tampa on day 8. He had things to resolve. The financial restructuring that the Victor situation had accelerated, the consortium negotiations that Falk was managing, but that required his personal authority at certain points, the legal architecture of dismantling the criminal infrastructure that he had been working on before Florida, and that now had an urgency it hadn't had before. He did not pretend the process would be fast or clean. She did not ask him to. He came back on day 14, and then on day 20. The pattern established itself without being named, which was how she preferred it. Not arranged, not contracted, not freighted with expectation, Just the fact of his presence appearing on her property at intervals and integrating itself into the operational reality of the place without disrupting it. He had a room in the resort now, not the suite from his first visit, but a smaller one, on the second floor, facing the garden rather than the Gulf, which she had assigned him without comment, and which he had accepted without comment. And the desk in that room had paperwork on it that he worked on in the early mornings when Noah was still sleeping. And by the time the breakfast service started, he was usually in the lobby or the garden and available. Available. That was the word she kept coming back to. He was available in a way that she understood, slowly, was not incidental. He had reorganized something to make it true. On the 22nd day, she told him what she had found when she'd gone through the resort's full maintenance archive, the thing she had been sitting with for 3 weeks, too large to bring into ordinary conversation, waiting for a moment that had enough room for it. They were in her office. Evening, the dinner service done, Noah in the bungalow with a book, and strict instructions about bedtime that she knew he was treating as suggestions. She set the document on the desk between them. Not Victor's letters, which she had given to Adrian's people on day 3, but something else. A transfer document from the resort's property records, dated 4 years ago, filed under the LLC name that had been Victor's contracting vehicle. Victor didn't just build the tunnels, she said. He purchased an option on the land beneath the resort's eastern footprint, a below-grade mineral rights option structured to look like a standard geological survey permit. She looked at the document. When he activated the consortium transfer, when he thought he was taking the organization, this option was supposed to execute automatically. The land beneath the eastern third of the resort would have passed to a consortium-controlled entity. Adrian looked at the document. He was going to take the ground out from under it. Literally. She sat back. The option was voided when the consortium transfer failed. The trigger condition never activated. But it was there. He had structured it so that even if everything else failed, he could make the physical property untenable. She paused. He was going to make it so I couldn't stay here. Adrian was quiet. I want you to understand something, she said, about why that matters to me specifically. She looked at the window, at the darkness over the Gulf where the water was invisible but present, constant, its sound coming through the glass as it always did. This place, I know it's a resort. I know it's a business property, and I manage it for someone else, and none of the brick and mortar belongs to me. But it's the place where I raised my son. It's the place where he learned to walk on that beach, and named a pelican, and learned to fish off that pier. Victor was going to take the literal ground beneath all of that. She turned back. And the reason I'm telling you is because I need you to understand the scale of what he was willing to do. Not to you, to us, to the small specific life that happened here. Adrian looked at her for a long time. The option is void, he said. The land stays under the resort. I know. I'm not telling you because I need it fixed. I'm telling you because it's part of the full picture, and I don't want there to be pieces of the full picture that I'm not saying out loud. She paused. I've been doing that for 7 years, not saying things out loud because there was no one to say them to. I'm done with that. He nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, she said. She closed the folder. She moved it to the side of the desk in the way she moved things that were finished. Then she looked at him. At the cut above his eye, healed now to a thin line that would probably scar, and at the gray at his temples that hadn't been there when they were young, and at the quality of patience in his face that was not the patience of someone waiting for permission, but of someone who understands that good things require time and is willing to give it. Noah asked me yesterday, she said, if you were going to live here. Something changed in his expression, not surprise. He was not surprised by what Noah asked, she had noticed, because he paid very close attention to Noah and anticipated his directions. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't know yet. She held his gaze. I told him it was complicated. Is it? She thought about that. About the organization that was not yet fully dismantled, the legitimate structures being built in its place, the years of work still ahead of him. About her own life, its shape, the resort, and the pier, and Gerald the pelican, and the 7 years of solitude that had made her exactly who she was. About Noah. About what it meant to choose someone not because you needed to be saved, and not because the past demanded it, but because you looked at the future and saw more in it with them in it than without. It's not simple, she said, but it's not as complicated as I thought it was going to be. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to be here, he said, as much as I can be, while the rest gets handled. A pause. And then more. After. After, she said. Yes. She looked at the window again. The Gulf was out there in the dark, doing what it did, indifferent to all of it. Marco found Gerald this morning, she said. Wing is healing. The feathers are growing back. A beat. Yeah. Noah considers this a personal victory. He's not wrong. She smiled. It surprised her, not the fact of smiling, but the ease of it, the way it came without effort, without the small tax she had grown accustomed to paying on good moments. Just easy. Just there. Outside, the last of the day was happening in the way it always happened here. The Gulf going dark by increments, the lights of the resort coming on against the evening, someone on the staff laughing about something in the kitchen corridor, the ordinary sounds of a place full of people living their ordinary lives inside an extraordinary landscape, and none of them knowing or needing to know what had happened in the tunnels beneath their feet. She stood up. He stood with her. Come to dinner, she said. Noah made Marco promise to save him the last of the key lime pie, and he's going to want someone to brag to about it. Adrian looked at her. Something settled in his face. The permanent vigilance of it softening, not disappearing, because it would never fully disappear, and she understood that and had made her peace with it, but softening into something that had room in it for key lime pie and a small boy's triumph, and the ordinary evening sounds of a place that had survived the worst it was going to be asked to survive. Yeah, he said. Okay. They went to dinner. Later, months later, when the organization's dismantling was far enough along that the word legitimate had stopped being aspirational and started being descriptive, when Noah had started calling Adrian by his name without any particular weight in it, just a name, the way names become ordinary through repeated use, they would stand on the rebuilt pier in the evening and watch the water and say very little, because people who have been through the particular kind of storm they had been through together develop a tolerance for silence that most people never find. Noah would be at the end of the pier with a fishing rod and a focused expression, conducting his nightly reconnaissance of Gerald's whereabouts with the dedication of a researcher in the field. The water would be doing what it always did. And standing there in the last of the evening light, Serena Vale would think about the word that her son had used months ago in the lobby, on the morning after the storm. Is it over? She had said almost. She had been right in the way that you are right about things that are ending. They end gradually, in stages, the last of the danger receding, the way floodwater recedes, slowly and then suddenly, and what it leaves behind is not what was there before, but something that has been changed by what it survived. Not worse, not better, exactly, just changed, carrying the shape of what it had been through in the way that all things carry the shape of what they have endured. The pier, the water, the man beside her watching the Gulf with the eyes their son had inherited. Noah called out from the end of the pier. Gerald had appeared, working the shallows in the dusk light, the torn wing held at its characteristic angle, the big body riding the water with the particular authority of something that has learned to compensate and has compensated so completely that the compensation has become indistinguishable from strength. Adrian turned to look. Serena watched him watch the pelican and then watch their son. And the light was going and the water was doing what it did and the pier was solid under her feet because she had made sure of that, and the evening was coming in off the Gulf. The way evenings always came in here, slowly, completely, with no particular mercy and no particular cruelty, just the day ending and the next one already somewhere out past the horizon, on its way. She breathed. She let the day go. The water moved, the pelican worked the shallows, and her son laughed at something, Gerald doing something characteristic, some small drama of wings and water. And the sound of it came down the pier to where she was standing, and she held it for a second before it dissolved into the evening. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.